Welcome again to the Automotive Quality and Project Quality Unit 2, Automotive Spice in Practice. Today in this lecture, we will zoom in the management processes as they are described in Automotive Spice. Before starting with the management process group, I wanted to explain what are the red frames in this picture. Basically, you can see the same picture, the same overview that I gave you through the previous lecture, but here we have some extract, the processes which are in the red frames. Those red framed processes are part of the VDA scope, and through this training, we will talk about only those processes. Why the VDA processes are more important than others? It is because those processes are basically the scope of any assessment of big OMs. Today, as we already said, the scope will be on month 3 processes called project management belonging to the management process group together with risk management and measurement. Project management process is the only VDA process in this group, and that is the reason that we will zoom into it only. Before connecting project management through the best practices, I want to talk about interconnections with supporting processes. You can clearly see that project management is in heavy interaction with supporting processes and that together with them is forming the basis of the project. Project management is continuously performing the cycle of scheduling, reporting, and adjusting. While performing the scheduling of the task, project management process is interconnecting with a change request management or problem resolution management, which are on the other side heavily relying on the perfectly done quality assurance. To be on the safe side and to do it in the same manner, month 3 is depending on configuration management definition of the work products. Before we zoom in, as I said, we want to see all the interconnections. Here I wanted to show you the mapping in between Automotive Spice, ISO 26262, and informational security. Spice and the management process, project management, month 3, is part of the VDA scope. And this is a mandatory process which is influencing level 2. And we will, of course, talk about this in the next lectures. This is mapped to the safety management during the concept phase and the product development. It is also mapped to the item definition, like a top-level item definition. It is also mapped to some kind of initiation of the safety life cycle, product development, and the system level, at the hardware level, and then the software level. Then ASPICE Management 3 process is basically also mapped to ISO for cybersecurity and information security, and you can see that mapping is gone through the information security roles and responsibility of some capacity management, information transfer, and similar. And by pulling those mappings, you can see that basically Automotive Spice is the one standard which is heavily supporting the application of ISO 26262 or information security. Now, let's talk about what is the purpose and what are the outcomes and work products of this process. The purpose of the project management is basically to identify, to establish, and to control the activities, and not only the activities, but also the resources which are necessary to produce a product. And everything about the resources and establishing the process is in the context of the project requirements and constraints. Well, these are only the purpose of project management process. But what are the outcomes which are necessary to establish this process? First of all, we have something which is called scope of work. And scope of work needs to be identified on the beginning of the project and needs to be defined in the work product called project plan. Furthermore, you need to have feasibility study. The feasibility study of achievement the goals of the project with available resources and constraints is evaluated through the review records. Then you need to have estimations, and the estimations are done like activities which are basically estimating not only the activities that you need, but also the resources necessary to complete the work and size and estimate. All those estimations must be mentioned in the project plan, in the schedule, and in something which is called work breakdown structure. Then we have interfaces. One good project manager needs to organize all the interfaces in the project, needs to check if all the organizational parts of the projects and organizational units are identified and monitored as well. This is also part of the project plan, but also there is something which is called communication record, which needs to exist. Then there is a work breakdown structure, which is also something which needs to be concerned in this base practice, outcome. And of course, there should be the stakeholder group list and the project status report. All of these work products are concerned in this outcome. Then all the plans on the project must be developed. It means that a project manager needs to ensure that project is developed and implemented and maintained according to the plans, which are developed through the various roles. For example, quality manager will create project plan for quality assurance. Then configuration manager will create configuration management plan. But project manager needs to ensure that execution of the projects are developed, implemented, and maintained through those project plans. Project manager needs to ensure, of course, monitoring. And this can be done only through, of course, monitoring and by checking the trends and by checking the reporting and by sending the reporting to the management. And the last outcome, which needs to be implemented in the project management process, is that project manager needs to take corrective actions if there are some goals which are not achieved and that we have some problems which are recurrence. The project management needs to perform some identification and to further prevent such problems. Now, when we know all the outcomes of the project management, we can deep dive in the best practices which are important for this project. The first base practice defined in the Automotive SPICE for month 3 process is you need to define the scope of work. And this best practice said that in identifying the project goals, motivation, and boundaries is something which is very important for the project management. In order to fulfill project scope, you will need, for example, the project rationale and business needs. You will need to define project goals and criteria for measurement of those goals. You need to describe the uh, um, product or service. You need to have that as the input for identifying the project goals. Then you need to have the overview of all deliveries. Example for the project goals shall be documented in the form of some kind of the scope statement and the project work breakdown structure. These examples will be for sure part of the work products like project management strategy, as I already mentioned, plan, and work breakdown structure. During the execution of best practice 1 in the project management, this best practice can be done several times in the increments. And this best practice is heavily related as well to the sub-10 change request management. It is very important to mention that project goals must be agreed with cost, time, and quality. And this is something which is also controlled from the quality assurance sub-1 process, which we will see later on. Remember that not only the goals should be listed in the objectives of the scope, also non-goals should be listed, and this is something which will improve the quality, the management strategy for sure. Next best practice is define project life cycle. Define the project life cycle for the project which is appropriate to the scope, context, magnitude, and complexity of the project. And this is basically something which needs to be defined on the beginning of the project, because without having the defined project life cycle, we cannot start any project or any activity. You need to know what are the points in time, what are the magnitudes, what are the complexity of your work in order to continue with it. There is also one note which is saying that this typically means that the project life cycle and the customer's development process are consistent with each other. Yes, this is of course a very important thing, because when you are defining the project life cycle in your company, in your project, you need to see if this is fully compliant with your customer needs. In order to fulfill this best practice, project lifecycle must be defined according to the company guideline. It means that it needs to follow already existing guidelines, if any. At the top level, typically consisting of several phases which are separated by milestones. In some companies, those milestones are company-wide milestones like called milestone 1 or milestone M10, 20 or similar, or there are some milestones which are used from customer overall release milestones and fully incorporated in the project. Also, milestone tailoring is done on the beginning of the project, and all dates must be agreed and aligned with the customer delivery. Work products which will be needed for such activity for defining project life cycle are schedule, feature, deliver timeline, work breakdown structure, which is aligned with feature delivery. Best practice 3, evaluate feasibility of the project, says that evaluate the feasibility of achieving the goals of the project in terms of technical feasibility within constraints with respect to time, project estimates and available resources are something which is really important for the project management. Example for this is that you need to cover with the feasibility study, you need to cover all technical aspects as well as project estimation in terms of project life cycle. Then you need to keep the evaluation, of course, of the feasibility study on the level that you know what are the resources which are available for your project. And then you need to have for sure the review by executive management for this feasibility study. Feasibility study is also done before starting the project. Maybe ASPICE put the base practice 3 as evaluated feasibility study, but for the evaluation, I think it should be somewhere before even starting to think about timeline of the project and life cycle. Work products which are needed for this base practice are basically feasibility study in some written form. You need to have resource lists or similar things, stakeholder lists. You have to have review record of the feasibility study. In this base practice, basically we are starting with a project management with a define, monitor, and adjust project activities, something which is done on the daily basis from the project manager. Define, monitor, and adjust project activities and their dependencies according to the defined project life cycle and estimations, as I said, are something which is regularly done by any project manager, and the adjustment of those activities and their dependencies are also part of that monitoring. Well, in order to fully this base practice, you need to include appropriate replanning if necessary, to think about the replanning, of course, to monitor through the review records what is happening on your project, to have for sure some corrective action register like we mentioned before, PDCA register or similar, to have I don't know, to have the activities related to the work packages, which are with some reasonable size, that you are ensuring that it is adequate to monitor them and that it is possible to monitor such a work packages. And of course, project plan has to be, and of course, schedule has to be maintained on the regular basis. The example can be, for example, change request is received. You will have some impact on the schedule for sure. Then you need to replan and update the schedule, and you need to replan and update the work breakdown structure. Of course, if necessary, you will update resources. Then you will update project plan and create the new work packages if necessary. This will be some kind of the very simple way how you can define, monitor, and adjust project activities. Work products that you will need are work breakdown structure, schedule, project plan, change request, evidence, and review record of updated project plan. Previous best practice talked about define, monitor, and adjust project activities. Now we are coming to the define, monitor, and adjust project estimates and resources. And it means that appropriate estimation method should be used for estimation of resources. Then that examples of necessary resources are people, and not only the people, but also infrastructure like tools, test equipment, communication mechanisms, and of course, hardware. Then you need to think about project risks by using, for example, MAN 5 and quality criteria by using SAP 1. And estimations and resources typically include not only the engineering resources, but management and supporting resources, which are often forgotten. In order to fully this BP, you need to have, of course, all the roles in place on the beginning and then to monitor and adjust them. It means that before setting the project estimates and resources, you need to have feasibility study, as we already know. One example can be that estimation method must be explained in the project plan. All necessary resources in terms of human resources, equipment, and tools must be listed. Then, for example, risk management can be done through Jira or any other tool. Then corrective action register can be done through the PDCA register and checked regularly, and this will be maintained by quality manager. Workbench diagram structure is again one of the products that you need as a project manager. But beside that, you will need to have risk tracking record, as I said, maybe through some kind of issue tracking tool like Jira or any other. But also you need to have a corrective action register, and you need to have project plan as well, which is updated regularly. Project management process is also talking about ensuring the required skills, knowledges and experience on the project. And in the case of deviation from required skills and knowledges, project manager needs to define trainings which are typically provided to fulfill such experiences. Typically, the line management is responsible for finding the resources with required skills, and this is done maybe through the HR process. But the task for the project manager is to ensure that those required skills are really there, and that if there are some missing aspects, some immediate actions for the trainings are taken. For example, there is no enough knowledge about automotive spice in the area of engineering processes. Project manager will immediately request, for example, automotive spice training from the quality team. The work products which can be impacted here are stakeholder risk list, like organizational matrix with clear defined roles, then competence matrix and training plan. And basically what project manager will take care is that those matrix on his project are clearly and regularly maintained, even if not in his project, but to check if they're maintained on the organizational level. BP7 says that project manager needs to identify, monitor, and adjust project interfaces and agreed commitments. Project interfaces relates to engineering, management, and supporting processes, and not only the internal interfaces, but also the external ones. In order to fulfill this base practice, project manager needs to track all kind of records which are dealing with the communication, like minutes of meeting, like important schedule of the minutes of the meetings which are regularly on the table on the project. There is one example on this slide. There is, for example, clear definition in project strategy who is communicated with whom and how to escalate some kind of the problem, to whom to escalate some kind of the problem. And there are also the key roles defined in the project strategy. Then there should be definition of customer interfaces on the project. Who can communicate to the customer interface and what are the engineering groups? Then in the project strategy, it should be that there are some regular escalation paths for all roles on the project. For example, quality manager in the project reports to project quality lead, and the regional project quality lead reports to the quality lead in some kind of the business unit. And then they're further escalate to the head of quality. This is only the example. Those roles are not defined in the automotive spice. This is just how to demonstrate the escalation part. Then, for example, in the project management area, there should be the definition of how project management assistant reports to the software project manager, and that furthermore, the software project manager can escalate to overall project manager. Here you also have some work products which are needed for this base practice, like stakeholder list, again, organigram, definition of communication and escalation paths, maybe even corrective action register, and project status report. In the same way as project manager is defining, monitoring, and adjusting other parts of the project like resources or activities, he or she needs to think about adjusting the project schedule on the basis of, for example, some change requests or some changes internally occurred in the company. And this is done through respect to the already known project schedule, and that, for example, he needs to pull off the dependencies between all the activities which are related to the other supporting areas or other engineering areas. And maybe in some other areas, he will discover that there are some changes, like testing can produce a lot of discovered bugs. And it means that we can then discover that our schedule is not really meeting the possibility of deliver on time. Then project manager needs to pull off those dependencies and to bring the new project schedule. Of course, definition, monitoring, and adjusting the project schedule is not the really easy job. He needs to have, first of all, on the beginning of the project, some feature map, or to have some kind of already defined um, release timeline or life cycle given from the customer. But for sure, what he needs to have to monitor and adjust this base practice and to really meet the outcome of the base practice is that project manager needs to have monitoring dashboard. Now we are coming to the base practice, which is saying that project manager needs to ensure consistency. And this base practice says that he needs to ensure the estimates, skill, activities, schedule, plan, all the interfaces and commitments for the project, and that all those are consistent across affected parties. While consistency check between feature release planning versus actual planning needs to be done, because this is maybe the most important aspect, because customer will ask for that, or you will only wait to have the real progress where you are is if you have this consistency check in between what is planned and what is actually done. Then it should be that project manager is updating on the regular basis and check consistency with already done in the project and what is planned with update of the project management plan and strategy. Then it needs to be checked if organigram is still consistent, because people are coming to the company, people are going and moved from one to another location and similar things. Then the most effective method for ensuring the consistency of the project is by performing the constant spot checks in the project. For this, quality manager can have a support of quality management team. The last but not the least best practice, BP10, which is review and report progress of the project, is something which is giving the overview of all project management activities. The reporting and reviewing of the status is something which is necessary in order to give to the management and to the overall stakeholders where we are on the project. It means that project reviews must be executed on the regular intervals by the management, and that during the project life cycle, after a release is done and also at the end of a project, some kind of lessons learned must be performed. There is an example on this slide. An overview of the features are required to be implemented in the project with the following information should be prepared. List of features, AC levels, for example, responsible team, information about product reuse and adoption, project-specific development, required maturity pre-release, and similar. The motivation for this is that the list of required features is the important input for your planning. Then dependency to month 3 BP4 for adjust when features are reassigned to different releases as part of your planning of the maturity. And you can see here that basically there are some work products which are repeated, like monitoring dashboard, regular reporting, and feature map. Now, when we've gone through all of the base practices of the project management, I need to mention that there is a capability level 2, which is called the managed process. And this capability level 2, which we will mention later on in the lectures, is that all the process activities which are mentioned on the level 1 in the process achievement, process performance, process attribute needs to be managed and properly done in some intervals on the level 2. It means that this capability level 2 is heavily impacted by the very mature project management. It means that the following process attributes, which are forming together level 2, like performance management process attribute and work product management process attribute, are heavily impacted by project management process. In order to prepare for the next exercise, try to understand what are the sequences of important aspects of the project management. Try to read through the base practices which are given in the Automotive Spice 3.1 supplement that are uploaded under modules. You can also think about what are the basic work practices work products and best practices which are important to be part of any kind of the project management, not only software project management.